But right now, it's all about fantasy football. We have Russ Bliss from fantasyfootballstarters.com, of course, getting you ready for your team as they play today. But big news coming out of Minnesota, because we were talking about the storms all morning long, Russ, and now the collapse of the Metrodome playing a role in when the Jets and the Vikings are actually going to play and where.
Yeah, well, the New York Giants couldn't even fly into Minneapolis yesterday. They had to fly into Kansas City. And then the Metrodome roof collapsed earlier this morning. So now we don't know when the game's going to be played. They originally had it scheduled for tomorrow night to have a second Monday Night Football game, but supposedly there's snow on the field. Don't know if it's going to be able to actually be a go for them. They could play it maybe at the University of Minnesota. Maybe they take it back to New York and play it in the Meadowlands. Maybe they go to a neutral site like Kansas City and play it there.
All these decisions to make, and we can see that from the video. There's quite a bit of snow. I think we were hearing at one point just a downfall of like some 20 inches all at once. And the roof on that, I've never been out there, but you said it's an inflatable roof?
Yeah.
What were they thinking?
I don't know. You put an inflatable roof someplace where there's the potential for blizzards and snow. That's not a good idea.
No, not the smartest thing, but I guess, well, the NFL folks are trying to hammer it out this morning, right? And we'll find out later on today.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, our sports guys will keep track of that, of course, and keep you posted on when that game will continue. But let's talk about injuries this week. As always, the injury list continues to grow.
Yeah, it's week 14. This is the first week of fantasy playoffs for a lot of fantasy football leagues, and knowing who's injured is paramount. Now, Ben Roethlisberger, he suffered that broken nose last week. He had surgery on it on Monday to repair it. He's not even on the injury report. I don't know how you managed to go through this and not be on the injury report, but he's going to be fine to play today. Brett Favre, he gets a reprieve because his starting streak was in serious jeopardy because of the shoulder injury. But now with the extra time that he's going to get, possibly he's going to be able to play. He was questionable and considered a game-time decision, but he may be able to play now. We're just going to have to wait and find out. If you've got him on your fantasy team, you've got to be very careful because you don't want to take that potential zero. You might have to go with somebody else. Now, at the running back position, you've got guys like Pierre Thomas is coming back for the New Orleans Saints. He'll play today. Marion Barber is out for the Dallas Cowboys, so Tayshard Choice is going to carry the football primarily. And Darren Sproles of the San Diego Chargers has a concussion. He's questionable. Definitely got to keep him on your bench. And then there's 5 wide receivers to talk about. Andre Johnson of the Houston Texans, he's got an ankle injury, but he's probable for the game tomorrow night. He's going to be out there. Vincent Jackson is probable. He's got the calf injury. He practiced in full on Friday. He is going to play today. You also have Des Bryant of the Dallas Cowboys. He fractured an ankle last week. He's been placed on injured reserve. His season is done. Brandon Marshall, hamstring injury, will play for Miami even though he's questionable. And Mike Williams of Seattle, he's got the ankle injury. He's very questionable. They call him a game-time decision. He's not going to play. I'd be very surprised if he played.
All those wide receivers you mentioned all have some type of a leg injury.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, they're running.
Amazing after 13 weeks.
All right, we want to talk about now looking at the players who are studs, who to start, of course. This is important as we move into week 14.
Yeah, well, now that we're in the fantasy playoffs, the way I break down all of my fantasy leagues, all the rosters that I have, is I categorize my players into 4 different categories. I've got my studs, I've got my reliables, I've got my inconsistents, and I've got my scrubs that are always sitting on the bench. And when you've got the studs, you play the studs. Regardless of the matchup, it can be a bad matchup. You want to play your stud players. At quarterback, you got Aaron Rodgers, you've got Tom Brady, you've got Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, Peyton Manning. You start those guys.
No surprise with these names.
Yeah, no sitting these guys. At running back, if you've got Adrian Peterson or Peyton Hillis, Arian Foster, Maurice Jones-Drew, Michael Turner, those guys are the stud running backs. You definitely make sure they're in your lineup every week, regardless of the matchup. And at wide receiver, Greg Jennings, Roddy White, Dwayne Bowe, Brandon Lloyd, and Calvin Johnson, those guys have performed. Through 13 weeks now, we've gotten a chance to know who the studs are. You have one of these guys, you have to start these guys.
Okay. And I think as people are watching this, they're like, all right, I have that guy on my team. So now they know. Don't even question who they're playing or what the matchup is. Just start them. Bottom line, start them. Okay, we want to take the focus now to, of course, our Cardinals. Quarterback situation. Do you think John Skelton is ready?
I actually do think John Skelton's ready. I like John Skelton. I liked him coming out of college. He's got a big-time arm. In preseason, it was obvious that he's got the type of arm that can really push the ball down the field. That's something that the Arizona Cardinals don't have with Max Hall. Hopefully he's got the accuracy, because Derek Anderson's got the big arm, but Derek Anderson was not all that accurate, and Anderson's out for this game. I think John Skelton's going to actually surprise a few people with how well he plays, but the Cardinals have got to make sure that they're smart. Ken Wisenhunt has to run the football. Denver's run defense is 31st overall in the NFL in fantasy points allowed. They give up a lot of touchdowns, a lot of yards. Expect to see a lot of Tim Hightower, a lot of Beanie Wells. I think that the Cardinals are going to have a 2-to-1 run-to-pass ratio today, no matter what, because they don't want to throw too much at Skelton right away.
Okay. Now, as for the Broncos, they recently fired head coach Josh McDaniels. How is this going to play a role in how their team plays today? Well,
now they've promoted Eric Studesville to the head coaching position, and he was the running backs coach. So whereas with Josh McDaniels, we saw this pass philosophy where they were throwing the football 65% of the time, I think you're going to see a lot more balance now with them. Noshawn Moreno is finally healthy after being bothered with a hamstring injury all season. And against the Arizona Cardinals, I just talked about Denver's run defense being 31st. Cardinals are 30th. So expect to see a lot of Noshawn Moreno today.
Have a really high-scoring game is the bottom line on this. All right. Well, we look forward to that game, of course, that matchup tonight. And finally, as we wrap things up here, we have a special offer for our viewers, as always. You have a trivia question for them, right?
Yes. Of course, every week we give away one of our fantasy championship packages at fantasyfootballstarters.com. And the first person to email Russ at fantasyfootballstarters.com the answer to the question, which Arizona Cardinals player caught John Skelton's first ever NFL pass last week?
Okay. So you had to have been watching last week's game, or at least seen the highlights.
Exactly.
All right.
Which Arizona Cardinals player caught that pass? You get free access to all of our tools the rest of this season.
And remind folks about that email, because I think we had Jeff's, because sometimes we email Jeff on those questions.
Yeah, he's out of the country.
He's out. He's not in town, folks, so don't email him.
Russ at fantasyfootballstarters.com.
All right, and we'll make it easy. It's on our hotline as well, but fantasyfootballstarters.com is the website.
And our algorithm's predicting a 21-19 Cardinals victory today. First time in several weeks that they're predicting the Cardinals.
Let's hope they deliver.
Fingers crossed.